Kuzangpo and welcome to this program. Well, as we know that education is very important and also it is being talked about much of the time because we can see that education is being discussed and tabled in the parliament, both the houses of parliament, National Assembly and the National Council. And also we had a session last week where we talked about the central school system with the political parties, including the ruling from the opposition and other political parties, where they said this central school system, which they agreed the policy and objectives for the central school is good, but they said there are problems. And to talk about this and other issues with the education system, I have here with me tonight the Education Minister, His Excellency Lempo Norwangchula. Welcome to this program. First of all, I would like to ask Lempo, do you think there are problems with the central school system as people are pointing out?
We have 60 central schools,
Yes.
and there are many central schools doing very well, but there are some central schools where we have challenges. And one of the prominent challenge in some of these central schools had been the overcrowding, which had been pointed out again and again. And unfortunately, it had resulted because of the overwhelming rush by the parents and the students that the hostel constructions are going on, and they could not wait until the hostels are completed. So there had been a rush and therefore a little overcrowding in some of the central schools. But we have now about 76 blocks of hostels completing in one, completing by July, and some completing by the end of the year, and this should address this overcrowding. But what one must understand is we have 607 schools where all of these challenges that we are facing in central school, we are facing in other non-central schools as well.
Exactly, Lal. The central schools have problems with the overcrowding, especially in the hostels, apart from the classrooms. Like Lempo is saying, there's a big rush. And also people have pointed out this central school system was established in a rush. What do you say on this? Because things were not ready, the infrastructure and all. So why did you establish so many central schools over the years? Like now the number as it stands is 60 central schools are there in the country, and you have plans to establish more.
So in 2 years we established 60 central schools, and these central schools are now benefiting 50,000 children who otherwise would have to walk hours to the school. And therefore, after the end of the day school, which is 3 o'clock, then they go back and where they are engaged in farm works, helping their parents at home. So they did not usually have a structured learning environment back home, day school and at home. But in the central school, we're able to create a conducive learning environment in terms of having morning study, evening study, night study, giving them the opportunity to immerse in sporting activities, cultural, value education. So these are the benefits that 50,000 children are now deriving out of this 60 central school. And our plan, as you mentioned, is to have 60 more central school, which would then cater to 50,000 more students. So then we would be catering to, we would then have central school space for any parent, any children who would want to study in central school on the merit of central school being able to provide quality education.
How do you assure there's quality education? Because people have also pointed out, the parents are taking their children to central school mainly because of the facilities provided for free, apart from the learning process there. How do you justify that?
My biggest worry as the education minister, if you ask me honestly, in the 607 schools that we have, if you ask me whether we are able to provide quality education, I would have a lot of reservation. I would not have the confidence to tell you eye to eye that yes, we are providing quality education. Because there are schools like Wangfu School is a primary school in eastern Bhutan, and there we have little children going to class PP, 6 years old, who are walking, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and walking for 3 hours to reach the school and back home, reaching home at 7 o'clock. And are they getting quality education? The environment, the challenges that they're going through tells me that the opportunity for quality education is less. Now, are these only 3 children in Wangfu school? In Wangfu itself, there are 70 children who are doing this track every day. Is Wangfu the only school? We have hundreds of schools where at least children are walking for at least 1 hour to the school. And then most of them get exhausted by the time they reach the school. And there's a school called Senghor, and most of our viewers would know where Senghor is. We have 27 children in that primary school. We have provided 3 teachers. So that makes a teacher-student ratio of 1:9, and that's one of the best in the world. The developed nations would find it difficult to afford that kind of a teacher-student ratio. But in Senghor, because the teacher has to teach all the subjects in all the levels, yet Senghor suffers from teacher shortage. Now, the problem is Senghor is not the only typical school who are suffering like this. We have hundreds of schools. We are heading the Senghor way because of the low birth rate, rural-urban migration. 607 schools is becoming unsustainable, a lot of challenges, not being able to provide quality education. So central school, we have greater opportunity to provide quality education because the children are under the supervision of our teachers from morning to night with structured learning environment.
The other worry or the concern that people have pointed out, and also the members of registered political parties in the country who came for a panel last week, were saying sustainability issue, because center school, everything is being provided for free. So how long can we go on establishing or starting with more center schools? It's going to cost the country, the government, a huge sum of money.
The greater question, perhaps the more grave question that I have is 607 school sustainable? And that looks to me unsustainable. And that is why central school needs to be established as soon as possible, because we need to sustain our education system. 607 schools, number one, is we are losing out the opportunity to provide quality education with 607 schools. And on top of that, they're becoming highly unsustainable. Of the 607 schools, we have 205 schools which are getting old and nearing 30 years, and these are community schools. Number of children in that schools are going down. We have schools like Trinangbi, Genshari, where the walls are falling apart. And unfortunately for us, Genshari and Trinangbi are not just these 2 schools. There are 205 schools which are in pretty bad shape, and that's why we need to build central schools as fast as is possible.
And also this question and also the concern raised by people is center schools are not equally distributed in the country. If we talk about the Dzongkhas, some Dzongkhas have more center schools and some have just 1 or 2. How was it done? What is the plan there?
So we have generally there would be 3 types of school, generally speaking. One is the schools in the urban areas. So in the urban areas, there will be no central schools. By urban areas, I mean Thimphu, Phinsiling, Kelifu, and Samru Dzongkha. And then we would have the central school, 120 central school, urban school, and then the private school. So putting these 3 categories of schools together, we would be able to cater to 160,000 students that we have as of today.
And also there's this issue and concern that whenever there's competitions or games and sports, because center schools, they feel proud. The students are coming from center schools, and there's a feeling that the center schools are given more importance than other schools. What is the policy? What do you have? What is the difference between the center schools and non-center schools? What is the difference?
The policy is very clear. We want every parent, every child to have access to a space in central school, because central school would be designed for quality education. And so many things are happening in central school. The quality of education is now evidenced through the stories that we get from the 60 central school. And that is why, yes, there is difference right now between central school and non-central school. And that is why we need to build 60 more central school. And that is what will happen in the first year and the second year of the 12th plan. With 120 central school in place, every child, every parent, if they so wish, should find a space in a central school.
And this concern that parents are becoming complacent, because now everything is provided free in center schools. There's no belongingness. There's also less care when it comes to we have these instances, and people have observed when the school closes, the student, as they go home, they don't care about what is being provided, like tracksuits being thrown in the train and all. What do you have to see on this?
Well, first of all, as a society, as a Bhutanese society, the question we need to ask is, are we seriously concerned about the quality education? I hear a lot of concerns being expressed, but if the expression of concern is genuine, it must be backed up by resources. And when it comes to resources in the central school, contrary to what many believe, the resources were modest. To establish 60 central school, we have put in 3.7 billion to establish 60 central school. Now, what is 3.7 billion given the 5-year plan size of 221 billion? And for education, 3.7 capital budget. It's small, relatively small investment. In terms of recurrent expenditure, for the 60 central school, what the additional expenses that is being incurred annually would be 200 million extra. Now, what is 200 million extra over an annual budget of 50,000 million? That's 0.4% only. So if we are really serious about quality education, and if you believe what you were saying, that people now believe that central school would provide quality education, then 200 million out of 50,000 million expenditure should not worry us too much.
Now, there was this draft, like a national education policy. Where have you reached? What is it like, the present status of this national education policy?
So we have this national education policy being drafted right now, and a lot of consultations are taking place. And I think it's reached at a final stage. But that is not to mean that we don't have policy in place. In fact, we have 6 or 7 relevant policies that had time tested, policies that had been developed with thorough consultations. And these are the policies that the reforms that are taking place are based on.
And there is also this concern when it comes to education. We lack a central research unit in the education system where people can research on everything on education system in Bhutan. Is it there in this national education policy, the draft we are talking about?
So we have different departments, different divisions, and if you're talking about on the curriculum front, we have the autonomous independent institution called the Royal Education Council, who had been mandated for development of curriculum, review of curriculum, endorsement of curriculum. So there is an institution which is based on research, and they have expertise there, they have experience there. So I do not believe that there's no space for research in the education system. We have the PPD unit.
What people think is it's time that we should have independent body like research unit.
So we have the Royal Education Council doing the research. Yes. And if you're talking about promoting research into our schools, we have initiated now with an research endowment fund for our teachers in the education system.
Now there is this issue, the burning issue that it was there for like over a year now, that our history should be taught in our national language, which was to happen this year, but it could not take shape. What has happened? Where did things go wrong, or what was the problem? What were the challenges?
Well, the history presently is taught in English in our school system, and I presented my education's view to the National Council. National Council had recommended that our Bhutan history should be taught in Danka, and I had presented the view of the Ministry for Education, and our view is right now the history teaching in English is going very well. Our history teachers who had been trained to teach history, and they are teaching in English, and it's going very well. Our students are learning history very well. The academic performance in history had been very good. So we don't find really the reasons to make the shift, make the jump. We had done it in 2005 and 2006, and the experiences had been not very good. These were had been piloted in those years. The experiences had not been good. And in fact, the students neither learned Danka nor did they learn history. So we would not like to repeat that.
But there was one time that our history as a Garab was taught in Danka, if Lempos are aware. What happened?
That was during 2005 and 2006 that I was mentioning to you.
Even prior to that, in the 80s or somewhere, is it true that our history was being taught in the schools in our national language? I'm
not aware of 1980s, but what we did in 2005 and 2006, until 2005 and 2006, we had been teaching history in English. And 2005, 2006, we tried it in Danka, and it had miserably failed. And our students were then deprived of learning history in those 2 years. So we had to switch back, we had to revert back to teaching history in English.
This concern shared by, or it was discussed in the National Council, that we have a huge budget deficit or huge debt in the country, and we have this lofty plan of establishing more center schools. What is your take on this? What do you have to say?
In fact,
huge debt that we are having.
In fact, as an economy, we are doing very well. In terms of the debt, in the last 30-40 years, perhaps for the first time, during the 11th plan, we have reduced our non-hydro debt. I think from third plan or fifth plan onwards, we had debt, and the debt had been increasing over the years, every year, until the 10th plan. And in the 11th plan today, as it stands, non-hydro debt has actually dropped, and this is the first trend that we are observing. So in terms of economy, in terms of our own being able to generate our own resources, I think we are now getting into a new shift into making more of our own resources. So yes, central school, 120 central school is a plan, but as a government, we are confident that we have the resources both for the capital and the recurrent to have 120 central schools in our country.
When we talk about education as we are doing now, teachers are very important. Teachers play a very big role in our education system, as they have to deliver education to our young people in the schools, in colleges, institutions. But we have this issue of teachers living their profession. What is there that can stop, or that we can check this phenomenon?
Generally, the larger context is that the reforms are happening in 3 areas. One is the school reform, so where central school feature as one of an important reform process. Then there's the curriculum reform, and then the other is the teacher development. And teachers, as you pointed out, are extremely important. In fact, they are the soul of the whole education system, and I keep on saying this, that a good teacher can substitute a bad curriculum, a bad infrastructure, a poor infrastructure, but it is not vice versa. You may have a wonderful school, you may have the robust curriculum, but you would not be able to substitute a good teacher by these curriculum and the school system. So therefore, we need to focus on our teachers. And you mentioned about our teachers leaving. Partly it's because our teachers do not feel well taken care of. And this is an area we would like to address, and we had got head along in addressing these issues. We were addressing these issues in two fronts: to make teachers competent and make teachers committed, that is motivated. So the things are going on these two departments.
We can make them competent by providing like trainings, or with the, you had this transformative pedagogy of the 21st century and so on. But when it comes to like giving how to like initiate them to stay back and all,
so
what is being done?
So we need to look into their working environment and see whether there are obstructions in making working environment comfortable, enjoyable for our teachers. And what we have observed is, one, the teacher workload. So we have found out that our teachers are overworked, and that is an area that we have tried to reduce the teacher workload now. That's why we have put in policies such as one teacher, one subject, and reducing the teaching workload of our teachers. This is a policy intent. It will take a couple of years to put that into the place. And that's why we have provided separate warden, matron, accountants, mess in charge. So all of these providing admin and management, taking out admin and management functions from our teachers. The other is the working environment itself in the schools for our teachers. Like for instance, living quarters is a big challenge for many of our teachers, and this is something that we would like to address again in the 12th plan. We are already making plans for it.
This providing higher incentives, like increasing the entry level, was discussed in one of the cabinet committee meeting. What was there actually?
So the other area that we could motivate our teachers is to enabling our teachers, empowering our teachers to have progressive career advancements. And right now we do have a policy where our teachers can rise up to a level of the secretary in the government. So the policy permits that. But what we have observed is the criteria which are really restricted, that prevents our teachers to get a smooth rise to a secretary's position, not just for teachers but for the vice principal and the principal. So that is where we, at the penciling the annual education conference, we had advised our HR department to see how we can liberalize this criteria and make a proposal to the RCC. So we should be making a proposal to the RCC to enable our teachers to have a smooth career advancement till the secretary level.
And also we have these restrictions for teachers being not allowed to move to other organizations. Can this be relaxed?
So that is part of the Royal Civil Service Commission's new initiative that they've come through, and this is called the superstructure, where RCC would want the same occupation group to remain and specialize in that particular occupation. So it becomes now difficult for our teachers to move out of their own profession into other profession because of the superstructure of the Royal Civil Service Commission.
I think Lempo said quite a lot on the education system and very many issues that we had. But if there are any other thing that didn't come in the questions, if you would like to
from the Ministry for Education, we are entering into 21st century, and 21st century future, 21st century world is a world that our young students would inherit, and it's a world that's going to be very, very significantly different from the world that we lived in. And therefore the preparation for this future world, the 21st century world, must be made now, and it should be made in our classrooms, and that is where big reforms must take place. And that's why the three reforms that we are undertaking, school reform, curriculum reform, teacher reform, are in many ways big reforms that will bring in a lot of changes into the future. And understandably, many people, many institutions are worried about it, concerned about it. But I would like to reassure the people that if you have to enter into the 21st century, if you have to prepare for the 21st century, this is the way that we must go. And we will make sure that through consultation, through research, through our expertise that we have in the ministry, in our school system, in our teachers, that these are the right reforms that we are making.
Like personally, what do you feel about the Bhutanese education system? Where are we heading?
It has served us very well.
Yes.
From the 11th plan, from the first plan to the 11th plan. First plan, it was developed to us by people from outside, executed by people from outside on a grant that was given to us by outside. Now 11th plan, we are almost on our own feet. Out of the 221 billion plan size, which is completely designed by our expertise, implemented by Bhutanese, and out of which 70% are our own resources. When you look into the success of these plan periods, one can attribute to the success of education, because the talents are created by education. But now we are entering into the new 21st century different world, and that is where we need to make that change, make that jump through the education system, so that our children are prepared for this 21st century world.
Nasla, I would like to thank Lempo for coming to this program and talking about the education system and the very many plans and policies that the education ministry has to move forward to make our education system a brilliant one. Thank you, and thank you for watching this program. Good night.